Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good and the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and hey, we got a great show today. As Zach would say, we have a great show, and we're going to be talking about telescopes and wood and rocks and all sorts of other wonderful things. I'm doing solo this week. Zach's going to be manning the sound booth for me because he's a little under the weather here. So, hey, first of all, before we start, thanks to our listeners. You guys are the reason we do all this sort of thing. We appreciate you being out there, and we appreciate you sharing the buff with your friends. It's always a good thing to do. Remember, we're on Apple Podcasts and all sorts of other places around the interwebs. Tell your friends to listen. Remember, spread the love, spread the buff, all right, and see what you can do to make them to get them to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. It's a wonderful thing. It helps us. It helps you. It helps us help you, which is a really good thing. So, hey, this week the big news has been the new telescope that NASA has, and we're going to weave that story of this new Webb infrared telescope into a bunch of other stories, and jointly these little stories are going to make a lesson for us. And hopefully I can remember how to put them all together and help you share that lesson with you guys. So, like I said, the big news is the NASA James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST. It is a new $8 bajillion telescope that NASA put up there in orbit. It's named for James Webb, the NASA administrator during the early days of NASA's great successes, 1961 to 1968. It's a follow-up to the Hubble telescope, which was named for Edwin Hubble, an early 1900s astronomer who found evidence that the universe was expanding. And we kind of say that as kind of a throwaway line. He found evidence that the universe is expanding, and that is a remarkable bit of a detective work that those guys did to do that. Back in the day, I mean, they were doing this way before computers, way before all the other fancy technology that we have. And they were figuring out just by looking at the wavelengths of the light coming from far off places that these far off places were moving away from us because the light was all shifted. Now, we talked about this stuff way back in episode 73 about color and light and how all that stuff works. It is remarkable stuff that Hubble did. And the other great thing that he did is he's got this great name. The Hubble telescope is pretty awesome. And I just feel a little bad for James Webb because it's just the James Webb telescope, but it just doesn't have quite the name that the Hubble does. But I tell you, it might not have the name, but it has the resolution and it has the power that while Hubble wins the name game, Webb wins the telescope game. This thing is incredible. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen pictures that came out of this thing. The main one that I saw, I think might have been the first one that they released, was a photo of the sky that showed a portion of the sky that was 1/20th of a degree square. So like if you take 100, well, like 360 degrees all the way around, right? So 180 degrees is half of that circle. If you take 1 degree and divide that into 20 pieces and look at that tiny little window, that window 1/20th of a degree wide and 1/20th of a degree high, that's about the size of a grain of sand on the end of your finger held away from your face. And they zoomed in and photographed that little tiny area of the sky. And I'm sure there's a location in some sort of strange space parlance about where exactly that photo was. But they took this infrared photo of that area, and they use infrared because I don't know why they exactly use infrared, but there's not enough visible light to do that. So they're focusing on the infrared spectrum, which is a piece of the electromagnetic spectrum we talked about weeks and weeks ago. So, it's interesting. I talk about visible light and whether or not you can see infrared, and you can't see infrared with your eyes. And I've talked to people about this. I had a video camera years ago, back in the days of video cameras, and the video camera actually picked up infrared. And one time I was video cameraing the kids being a bunch of yahoos in the basement watching TV or something. And one of them was sitting on the sofa and flipping channels with the TV remote. And the TV remote is an infrared remote. It sends an infrared signal to the TV that you can't see, but the TV can see it. And it knows how to change the channel. And it turns out when I was pointing the camera at the kid holding the remote and the kid was clicking on the remote, you could see little flashes of light coming from the TV remote, and the camera picked them up, but my eyes didn't. So I only saw that later when I watched the footage I had recorded on that video camera, that my video camera was picking up infrared signal, which was, to me, was remarkable. So I think about that. Essentially what NASA did is they took my video camera, they mounted it on a gigantic satellite, they sent it out into orbit, and they pointed it at this little 1/20th of a degree by 1/20th of a degree sector of the sky, and they let it sit for like a long time, and they recorded what they saw, and they picked up all sorts of wonderful things. Okay, so this is a really small area. It's 1/20th of a degree in each direction. So if the question to me was what area of the sky was that? And if you do some rough calculations with a grain of sand that is approximately 1/20th of a degree wide, there's about, depending on how you do the math, the way I got it, I got about 50 million images that size you could make of the sky. Okay, so if you take a big sphere and you plaster put a sphere around you and put grains of sand on the inside of that sphere, where one grain of, at about a meter from your eyes, there's going to be about 50 million grains of sand there that are going to cover the entire sphere around you. And you could take a picture of each one of those. And if you look at this picture that they took, and you can zoom in, you see all sorts of wonderful things inside there. And there were three things that stood out to me with regard to this photo. Okay, so the first thing that stood out to me was that everywhere we look in the sky, we see something different. So it's not like, this is not like an old cartoon. Like, I remember watching the Flintstones when I was a kid, and Fred Flintstone would be running through his little Flintstone house, and he'd run, chasing the dog, and the same background would rush by him again and again. You can see this like in the old Jetsons cartoons or Scooby-Doo or all these kinds of things where they're running along, and the same, they just recycle the background, right? I mean, if you're an animator drawing things by hand, and what matters is Shaggy and Scooby chasing the guy in the mask, then the background doesn't really matter. But as a little kid, you start recognizing that this is the same background going back and forth. Well, that's not what happens with the sky, all right? The sky is not a repeating background. Everywhere you go is a different thing, all right? And there are 50 million different images of the intensity that the Webb telescope took. There are 50 million of them that you could take to get the whole sky, okay? That's the first thing. Okay? The second thing is that even though everywhere we look, we get something different, everywhere we look in the sky, we see the same, all right? And what I mean by that is we get the same kinds of things, okay? We get stars and planets and nebula and gas clouds, black holes, pulsars, and all those space kinds of things, okay, that you see out there that you read about in space books, right? And all of the thing that strikes me is all of those things follow the same rules of physics. They follow this gravitational constant. The speed of light in a vacuum is always the same. And these same rules apply to all of those things, all 50 million of those images with all the things inside them, every little atom in there, every little molecule, every little burst of energy, every little waveform, all that stuff, they're all following the same rules, right? All 50 million little images are the same in that regard, okay? This giant and majestic universe, the whole thing plays by the same rules. Now, these are complicated rules. These aren't the Newtonian rules, because when you start going with stars and speeds of light and stuff, you got to go do special relativity and all that kind of stuff. But these are rules, and these are rules we can figure out, okay? So the important thing to note there is, even though all these little ones are different and they're all the same, right? It is not a random, shapeless void that is just doing running at a whim. Okay. It is a rational system. It can be understood, and it plays by rules, which is a wonderful thing. Okay. And that's you may be sitting here in this age of science that we live in and think, well, of course it plays by rules. That's how the world works. But that wasn't how the ancients always understood that. Okay. They didn't always think that. They thought that there were things just being whimsical and deciding what they wanted to do. The idea that you can understand the nature of creation, the idea that is rational, that's an Enlightenment thing. Okay, that comes out of Western thought, that this is a thing that can be done. Okay, and we live in this world now. It's in the air that we breathe, but that wasn't always the case. Okay, and then the third thing that I thought about is that everywhere we've looked like this, we've pointed telescopes to the sky, not just this telescope, but lots of telescopes at the sky for a long time now. We've looked at lots of different places, and we're always looking for evidence of life amongst the stars. And people do computations. What's the probability we're going to find an Earth or a thing like Earth? And we found lots and lots of things that might fit the bill, but none of them do. All right. Everywhere we look comes up empty. Everywhere we look, it's rocks and gas and rocks. It's just rocks, okay? And as we mentioned a couple episodes ago, life appears to be in only one place, all right? And that is this little thin shell of life on the edge of this rock that we live in, okay? So all of the everywhere stuff that is everywhere out there, all right? That's different than our stuff, our Earth stuff. Ours looks different, okay? And the only place out there that is like our place here is our place. So I found that remarkable, okay? And that was the Webb telescope. Okay, that's story number one. Story number two. So I'm in my workshop, and I was sanding and finishing a project. And, I was like, I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm under the impression that woodworkers hate to do the finishing. It's tedious. It's fraught with mistakes. It's very easy to screw up. And it's the place where if you can screw up everything else you've done, it's the last little bit, but it's putting the cherry on the top. But imagine if you put the cherry on top of the sundae and when you did, the whole thing fell apart. That can happen in finishing. And when I was working with the wood in my hands, I became more and more appreciative of this material that I was using. Okay, the wood material. Okay, you brush it with the sandpaper, and it comes off in these little tiny dusty pieces, and it becomes soft and smooth, and you brush it away, and now it's pretty. Okay, so this wood is strong, but it's carvable and it's cuttable, and you can make it smooth, and you can make the edges square, and they hold their shape, or you can round them with a nice sharp bit on your saw or your plane or your router. Okay, and if you keep that wood dry, it lasts a really long time. And that wood, as long as you don't let it rot, it's recyclable. I mean, it's really an incredible material to work with. Okay, and so a couple of years ago, I was working on this student desk from an old school, somebody found it at an antique store. It was this metal frame with a wooden top and a wooden seat. And maybe some of you have seen that. I posted it on Facebook a couple of years ago. But somebody found this in the bowels of an antique store, and the wood was all broken and was scratched up, and some of the parts were missing. And so they said, "Can you refinish this?" And I was like, "I can't refinish it because there are parts missing, but I can." So I got some more wood, and I just actually built replacement parts for the parts that were there because they were so scratched up and destroyed, and they weren't all there. And by the time I would have taken them down to good wood, they would have gotten a lot smaller and it wouldn't have fit. So I made these replacement parts, and I made a new antique desk. And it was quite difficult. There were a lot of weird angles. But then when I was done, I had all these old parts left over, and this desk was probably 100 years old. So when it was made, that wood that was harvested was even older. Okay, so this tree was probably, I don't know, how old are maple trees and ash trees when you harvest them? Or certainly when you harvest them in like 1870, how old are they? All right, so this was a very old tree, And this was a long time ago. It was harvested. So these scraps of wood that I had left over in my workshop, these scraps were laid down by biological processes that were taking place sometime around the time of the American founding. I mean, this is remarkable. These trees might have been walked by Washington and Adams and Hamilton. Who knows? Maybe or they might even be older. They might even be older. Okay, so these scraps are sitting in my workshop, and I thought, well, I should make something with these. I'm not going to just throw them away or burn them up. So I trimmed them up, and I sanded them down, and I put them together, and I made some cutting boards, and they were gorgeous. It's just beautiful wood hiding underneath all the muck and all the decay and the dirt, and the student scrawls on them, under the the kids with the knives carving into them on the desk. And these are not cutting boards that sit in my kitchen. And I think about wood as a material that we use, right? And all these hundreds of different species of trees, and all these different woods have different properties. Pine is real soft, and ironwood, of course, is really hard. And some of them expand and contract when the weather changes a lot, and some of them don't move at all. And some of them are really pretty grain, and some of them have like worms that dig into them. And when the beetle larvae burrow into the wood, and as they do, they drag behind them on themselves spores for a fungus, which releases some chemical which alters the wood, and you get this what's called spalting of wood, and you get these beautiful patterns in wood. All right, so this wood is such an incredibly diverse and varied material that can do all sorts of things. Right, we can use it to build houses and furniture and baseball bats and popsicle sticks, and we can use them to make paper or dashboards for cars or fences to outline your property. All sorts of things you can do with wood, okay? And this wood is out there literally growing on trees. All right. It's this incredible resource that we have. And I was talking to Harry, and he explained to me, he said there was some message board thing that was going on. People were talking about if aliens came and tried to take over our planet and take what was valuable for on our planet, the first thing it would take would trees, right? It's such a wonderful resource that we have. And all we really got to do to use the wood is when we take it down, we got to make sure we put more up. All right, so that the next generation has the same great, wonderful building material to work with. And then the other thing is to recycle the wood that we have. All right, so stop throwing away old furniture that you have. All right, send it to somebody like me. We'll take it apart and we'll make cutting boards or new student desks or something. All right, this wood is invaluable, and it's a wonderful resource. And it literally grows on trees, but it only grows here. All right, this is the only place in the universe where it grows. Okay, that's story number 2, is the wood. All right, story number 3, spaghetti. All right, so I was making spaghetti, and the way I make spaghetti, I love Italian sausage. So I grilled up the sausage in the pan, and fry it up, and you put it in there, and it sizzles and pops and makes all the wonderful smell. But it makes a lot of grease, so you drain the grease out, and sometimes it gets it leaves marks on the pan. All right. If it gets just a little bit too hot there, you get these black burn marks on the bottom of the pan where the sausage sits. So you drain the grease off, and now you get this black stuff on the bottom of the pan. But you know what? You know what you do? Then you make the sauce in the same pan. Okay. So you add the sauce. You can dump it out of a jar, or you can make it yourself. Okay. And you take these vegetables you have, and you pour them in the pan, and you heat it up, and you add all these things, and you dump the sausage back in, and you have this concoction that you put on top of your pasta, and it's just like heaven on earth. All right. But what's really wonderful about doing that process is that the one vegetable that you almost always, the fruit or the vegetable, depending on how you look at it, the tomatoes that you put in there are remarkable. They are a remarkable food. All right. First of all, it's because they're wonderful, and they're full of antioxidants and all sorts of other things, but they're acidic. And the acid in the tomato sauce cleans the pans. Okay, it takes that stuff off the pans and gets them all clean, and not exactly clean. There's still a little bit of stuff left in there. So you get done with the meal, and you scoop the sauce out, and you put it in the fridge for later, because there's always some leftovers, which makes it great for the next day. All right, and then what I did with the pan the last time I made it, I put the pan in the sink, and I filled it with hot water, and I dumped in some soap, and I let it soak. Okay. And what happens inside there is the soap and the water, all those little molecules bouncing around, all those same little molecules that are out in the stars, that are out in the universe, following all this rational, um, they are following the rules of how atoms and molecules work. They work on beating up and scrubbing out those last little bits of stuff that are in the pan. And I let it sit a couple days, and then I went to wash it out. I dumped out that water, turned on some hot water, added a little bit of soap to the scrubby, and I scrubbed it, and it came out spotlessly clean. Okay, and I think to myself, as I'm washing this pan, I'm thinking about all these things, about the acid in the tomatoes, and I'm thinking about the scrubby that I have. It's got little scratchy, it actually scratches those things off. The soap, how one of the soap, part of the soap molecules is hydrophobic and one side is hydrophilic, so it grabs the thing and pulls the water pulls it away, and it pulls the thing away. And you get this shiny, beautiful pan. And I'm like, what a wonderful system we live in. What a wonderful world. It all just works for us, right? It all works for us. Now, I'm living here in 2022 now, and maybe back in we've had soap for thousands of years, I think, but if we haven't had we haven't had running hot water. Okay, that's been quite a while. But a lot of these other things have been discovered decades, if not centuries ago, and all of these things work to make our lives better. It's this world we're in is full of marvels on top of marvels on top of marvels. And on top of that, you get spaghetti, and you get beautiful cutting boards, and you get telescopes that gives you pictures of space. All right. That's the story number 3. Here's the last one. And that is the granite countertop. Okay. So we're building this new house. And one part of that is you have to go out to the granite countertop, warehouse, and you have to pick your countertop, like which countertop do you want here in your kitchen. And this is, if you have done this, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't done this, you need to go do it. You need to find a place that does granite countertops and just go look at what they have. Okay. So if you go to the warehouse, they have these gigantic slabs, like an inch or an inch and a half thick of granite. Some places have granite and marble and other kinds of stone, but most of them are granite. And some of them are there. They have these new things now that are some other composite things that they make out of, they take some stones and grind them up and put them with some polymer and mix them together, make some new swirly patterns that weren't even there before. But I'm looking at these granite slabs, and I just love the granite because it's natural stuff. And a lot of it is it's a little grainy, so it'll be kind of like gray with black specks, or it'll be like kind of almost black with green specks, or all these miracle, wonderful different patterns are hiding in there. And there's this one. I came around a corner and I looked at this slab, and quite literally, it took my breath away. All right, and this was almost like Sophie there. All right, it took my breath away, and it was called Starry Night, and it looked just like the painting of Van Gogh's Starry Night, with the swirls and the swirls and the layers and the ribbons of light and color going across this thing. And this thing is a rock. Okay, it's a piece of granite that is 10 or 12 feet long. It's an inch thick, and it's probably 4 or 5 feet high, and it weighs a ton or more. And here, not carved into the rock, but embedded in the rock are these swirly patterns. And my heart is just pounding looking at this slab of rock that came out of some quarry in either Italy or South America or New York State or somewhere. It just, they cut this piece of granite out of the rock. And I started thinking about that rock, because it's a rock. Okay. It's just like a rock that you find in your yard, or a rock along the side of the road, or a rock that you see on the side of the mountain. Okay. This is a rock. Now there's 3 kinds of rocks. Okay. 3 basic kinds of rocks. One way you can categorize them is igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. I remember we learned this in early grade school, and I had trouble with these because I wasn't sure how to categorize them, what it really meant. Now, igneous rock is what happens when molten rock cools and hardens and crystallizes. Okay, so granite is an igneous rock. So it is formed deep underground in like pools of magma, slowly cool and make these crystals that are the rock. Okay, so that's granite. Is this igneous rock that cools, or is this magma that cools, magma or lava? that cools. All right, metamorphic rock is rock that changes from one kind of rock to another kind of rock through heat and pressure. So if you take like sandstone and you compress it over time, you get marble, I guess. And some of these rocks, you get these intrusions or infusions of other kinds of rocks go in there through pressure and time. Pressure and time is the history of geology, okay? And sedimentary rock is when you take some kind of rock and you break it apart into tiny little pieces through weathering and the erosion, and you wash it downstream, and then you build up layers and layers and layers of rocks, layers of gunk at the bottom of an ocean, and then it gets packed together, and you get these beautiful striations, and you get these strata when you see, like, driving through the down the highway, you see these rocks along the side of the road, and you see these beautiful layers of different things. Those are sedimentary rocks. So this granite is an igneous rock. This starry night is an igneous rock. There was magma in a magma chamber beneath some sort of plate tectonic subduction zone or something, and it formed this gigantic wad of magma down there below ground, and it sat there, and it was just like mush. I don't know what magma does when it sits there. It kind of bubbles around, and probably it's a liquid, so it moves. Probably it has convection currents and all sorts of stuff in there. And somewhere along the line, it formed this starry night stuff, and it slowly cooled over the course of I don't know how long it takes to cool, depending upon where the heat source is. So this granite is down there, okay, and it was formed millions or maybe even billions of years ago. It's there in this huge magma pool, deep, 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 deep underground. And it sat there after it cooled, and it sat and it sat and it sat for a long, 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 long time. And then somebody at one point started carving away the mountain, and they come in and they cut this big machine, has take a slice off of it, and they polish it smooth, and out comes this starry night artwork there's artwork buried in the ground in the magma chamber that becomes the granite. Okay. And what I keep thinking is, like, I'm standing there just in awe. My heart is pounding and I'm short of breath. My eyes are welling up thinking about this, how beautiful this thing is. It's incredible. You go look up starry night granite, go to your Google machine and look it up. And the thing I keep thinking about is the words from the book of Job. Okay, I think of the words of the book of Job when God is chastising Job in chapter 38 for being a whiner. Okay, so Job's this guy, and he's got it going great, and then things don't go well, and it's a question of whether his faith is strong enough. Okay, and at one point he's kind of turning into a whiner and asking God why all these bad things happen to him. You know, why should these things happen to me, God? Come on, come on. Help me understand this, all right? I should be allowed to do this. And chapter 38 says, Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds for it, and set bars and doors, and said, Thus far you shall come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stopped. All right, and God goes on and on and on. He talks about all these things that he's done, and Job hasn't done anything. All right, and he was like, who are you to be questioning me? All right, who are you to be questioning me? All right, he talks about all sorts of, you read it, you know, who takes care of the bears? All right, who makes the trees grow? Who makes the wind blow? Where is the storehouse for the snow and the hail? All right, where is all this stuff, Mr. Job, who thinks you're so fancy and you think you have everything? But the word that comes to me is that first piece. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? And I think of this granite rock. Okay, millions, probably billions of years ago, God made that magma pool. Okay, and and it gurgled, and it convection currented, and it made this starry night artwork that billions of years later has been revealed. And this granite now sits in a warehouse in Indiana with all of these other different kinds of granites from around the world. These are literally the foundations of the earth. These are the things that were laid, right, billions of years ago, right? Who laid its cornerstone, and on what were its bases sunk. These are the foundations of the world. And I sit there and I'm staring at this thing thinking, this is the foundation of the world. This is what was put here. And it was put here like it's there for you. It's part of this grand planet. And I'm sure like there's granite all over this planet in the earth, and all over through that telescope. You look through those little 1/20th by 1/20th little windows into the universe, and all over this incredible universe is all of this stuff. Okay. So this granite is sitting there in the ground, and it's just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally we find it. Okay. And it was put there, right? And has all these colors and swirls and this inherent beauty, just like the telescope reveals to us. So the telescope reveals that beauty of the far reaches of the universe, and the granite reveals that, like when you get in, you cut it open. Okay. And I keep thinking, why is all of that there? What's the point of all that stuff? Okay. So in all of creation, we are the only ones that build a telescope to try to understand the depths of the cosmos. And we are the only ones who understand this remarkable utility of the resources we have. And we're the only ones who put together a system to conceive of spaghetti, all right, and sauce and soap and water to clean these pans when we're done. And we're the only ones that burrow down into the foundations of the earth to discover how beautiful and glorious all of that stuff is. We literally dig down to the foundation of the earth. All right. And I find out that in all of these things that are just out there, that are missed by all these other species and all these other animals and all these other stuff, right? It's missed. It's like my dog doesn't care. All right. The birds in the trees don't care. All right. We're the only ones that care. We're the only ones that see that. And I come to this conclusion that this world was made for us, right? This thing, this beautiful and useful and glorious world, it's wasted on the other beings, right? We're the ones who make use of what is here. Everything from hydroelectric power to oil and nuclear power and electricity and electromagnetic waves and metallurgy, bricks and concrete and food and wood and all of these things that are here. We study them. We understand them. We take them apart and we make use of them. Right? In Genesis, Adam is placed in a paradise. Okay. God builds this thing. He builds the Garden of Eden as a paradise. Right. And that's a special word. Okay. That word means it's a walled garden. It's a garden with walls. Okay. And I think that's really important. And you need a wall on the garden, right? Because inside the garden is one thing and outside the garden is something else. Okay. So Adam is in the garden. Right. And it's not a wilderness. It's not a walled wilderness. It's a walled garden, right? Which means it needs a caretaker. It needs somebody who understands how it works, and he has to take care of it. He has to nurture it and make it grow and make it useful to him while he's inside the wall. Okay. He's given dominion over this to maintain its growth, to keep the garden, right? To build it, to make good stuff from it, and to make sure it lasts, and to be fruitful and multiply. He is called to share in the very act of creation that is explained in the passages that precede that. Okay. He is image and likeness of God. And I've said this over and over. This we've named the podcast. This is what we ought to do. All right. Man is image of God and likeness of God because he does the things that God does. Now, he is not God. All right. And that's precisely the point. But he is called to be image of God. He's imago Dei, right? If you study the God in Genesis, the first couple chapters, just read those, right? What you see is what God does. He creates and he sees that it's good. And Adam, in that regard, is called to create and to do things that are good. Okay. And we need to act that way with everything we have here. Okay. So you guys know I'm a big fan of our capitalism. All right. We have a lot of wonderful things, beautiful technology, wonderful food to eat. We got airplanes, we got electricity, we got all that stuff. But our capitalism, the things that we do, needs to be more than simple economic utility. Okay. Just because we can't measure something quantitatively doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. Okay. There are things that matter, like justice and honor and courage and sacrifice, respect, humility, understanding these things, these principles. Okay. And then our big three, like truth, beauty, and goodness. These things matter, and they need to all be in this equation for determining what we do. Right? We can't determine what to do just based upon economics. Okay, economics is good; it's important. It's a good thing to have, but it needs to be balanced against all these other things that we can't really measure. Okay, we need to look. Let's look at what we used to create and how we cared about these things, about these grand cathedrals of Europe or these beautiful parks in our old cities, the lands we have for national parks, for architecture that stood the test of time, furniture and jewelry that became heirlooms, not IKEA stuff that we use for a year and a half and then throw out into the dumpster. Right? Aqueducts that were built by the Romans that served the people and brought life-giving water, but then became spectacular displays of the glory of engineering and are still used for railroads in modern Europe. Okay, make the effort to make your life more than just the total in your bank account or the pursuit of this latest trendy technology. Our inventions are there to serve us and to make our lives better. And if we are looking to serve them, we need to get rid of them. Right? They're not helping us. If they don't make your life better, throw them out. Become truly enamored with those things that are truly beautiful. This world was made for us. Fill your image and your nature as Imago Dei. Create and make things good, make them true, and make them beautiful. Right? Create things like starry night granite, like telescopes that see back to the far reaches of the beginning of the universe. Right? Make some spaghetti, eat with friends. Right? Seek the good, be the good, and spread the good, and enjoy the adventure of life.